AI, a bit about messages, bit about think like a journalist, and a bit about print versus broadcast as well. So I think there with some of the organisations you're with, there is an opportunity not just to think about print opportunities, but also broadcast. That could be radio or TV. Feels very big and scary, but I think they should be considered, and there's a few sort of slight differences in that. So a little bit about me. Former account director of a content marketing agency. I've worked in Melbourne, Australia, and in London before, as well as other places. I'm a real generalist, and unashamedly so. So I've got sort of background in sort of like copywriting and PR and journalism, but also digital marketing, SEO, LinkedIn, various different things. And as well as that, the sectors I work in are quite wide and varied. So I've got not-for-profit and other elements like that, but also sort of construction, tech, hospitality was a big one. I really don't mind. I much rather find out about the stories that are there to try and cover them. Strong on return investment and measurement. An oversharer, so I talk very quickly. If you don't understand something, you put your hand up or pop something in the chat and I'll try and come to it. I drink too much coffee, probably case in point this morning. And I'm a mammal, so middle-aged man in Lycra, cyclist, sorry. So one of the first things I always like to try and do with any project, with any group organisation I work with is start with why. Any Simon Sinek fans in the room, he's a guy that wrote a whole book on this sort of approach. But the main sort of four areas I look at are audiences, messages, objectives, and then an openness to like testing and learning. So for these, think about it from your organisation's point of view. So audiences, there's always more than one. There's always plural. So it's always got the S at the end. Whoever you're dealing with, there are multiple stakeholders. Could be fundraising, could be elements of policy, could be the end users or the end sort of customer or client that you have. Could be people that are adjacent to them that could help influence sort of their decisions or signpost them to your services. So from that, the messaging changes, the content you put out changes, and the press release, the kind of messaging with the press release. With messages, there are kind of like two elements here. So you sort of cut this down into the value. So what you're trying to add to people, how you're trying to help them, what's the thing you're trying to add. Value proposition is sometimes thrown around in the marketing world, but essentially, what is it you're wanting people to do or change as a point of what you're sharing? And then the values is how you're trying to say it. So obviously with the audience I've got in this room, it's a lot more friendly than sort of like that more commercial side. But actually there's a commerciality side to all businesses, all organizations. So how are you trying to say what you're saying? What do you want them to feel? How do you want them to feel rather than actually take an action? Do you want to sort of like change a view of something in your world? And then from that, what sort of channels could you potentially use? Next one is the objectives. I'm going to go to the second bullet first. So it's always outcomes for me rather than outputs. So the outputs could be the press release, could be the social media posts, could be the events or activities that you run. The outcomes is what's the sort of end goal, the things you're trying to demonstrably change. It could be something to do with policy in Scottish Government, or it could be something to do with getting more people down to a certain event or more people signed up to a certain register or whatever it may be. What's that kind of end outcome? Kind of work backwards from there. And then the final one is always agile, so test and learn. This is sort of usually sort of more applicable for wider sort of marketing work, but in terms of like a press release, dealing with the media, getting a message out there, something may not work at one point, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's completely dead in the water. So you can try a different approach. That's not to say you can't sort of email the same journalist 3 different approaches on 3 different days, because that won't necessarily work. But if something isn't sort of getting attention and getting the buzz that you want, there are other opportunities, milestones you could use to talk about that a little bit further down the line in a slightly different way. So yeah, be brave, creative, and just try things, because none of us ever sort of know what our audiences will end up doing, or whether that certain piece in the press will get picked up, whether that's trade press or sort of regional or national newspapers or magazines. So yeah, sort of be brave and don't worry if some things don't necessarily work. A little bit about sort of the audiences and the tone of voice. So consider who you're talking to. Yes, you're talking to the newspaper and the editor or the journalist, but who is the sort of end audience as well? So one, it's got to be clear for that gatekeeper to get through that get them to open that email, to send it to the journalist, to get them to write about it. But who's the end audience? What language are you going to be using in your quotes or in your other pieces on your website? Will people understand you? If it's something that's going out to regional press rather than, let's say, a trade press or a specific sector issue, make sure you try and keep it as simple as possible, because people won't sort of understand it and they'll just discount it. Especially the journalists, they're getting hundreds of emails a day, if not more, on bigger titles, many hundreds. So keeping it as simple and straightforward as possible for them is the first sort of gatekeeper to get through. So yeah, what's your jargon? Plain English over more complicated words. That said, there's always caveats with everything. It depends. If you're in a more sort of like technical world, if I had previous clients in sort of science and things this way in Cambridge, I'm in East Anglia, and you have to put in that jargon because that is the jargon and that is the complicated language they understand. If you don't, you're kind of missing a trick. So just be aware of who the title is you're sending it to, and whether they understand the challenges or the specificity of your challenge. If it's a trade press or a title that understands what your problems are, that can help. And then the final one is just more about sort of business side. But whether you're talking to trade press or whether you're talking to consumer media or whether you're talking to a reporter, you're still talking to people. So try and keep that as simple as possible. Come on to something on that in a second. So a bit of a scary photo here, but that's sort of the impression that a lot of people feel about, from my experience talking to clients, sort of the media is, you're under the spotlight, you're lots of people talking about you. The reality is they're so busy. They are crazily busy trying to get, essentially at this point in time, and especially regional titles, maybe also trade side, trying to get advertisers in. So they're trying to increase the number of hits on their website to get more, to boost their rankings, so then they can sell that into an advertiser. So they're very, very busy. So don't worry so much about, or would they or wouldn't they like this. If they don't want this, they'll discount the email. Unfortunately, they may not reply to you and say, sorry, that's not quite for us. But don't be afraid of just getting involved. So with that, set your expectations. So that's in your organization, that's with yourself, and with maybe sort of people further up the chain in your organizations or companies. This won't change the world. It's part of a bigger machine. The press release and dealing with the media is part of it, but it's also got to be sort of consistent across sort of other areas of work that you do. It's not luck. It's knowing what that journalist wants. Research the title. If you've got a press release, you might adapt it into 4 or 5 different versions slightly for the title, for the first paragraph, to make it more appealing to a certain title that you're sending it into. That could be regionally, by swapping out sort of like different words and phrases from geographies. It could be in terms of like trade press or different levels of trade press that might understand fundraising more than other areas, for example. You don't necessarily need a big agency or a massive budget. Sometimes it's about the story and getting the timings right. In terms of the timings, sometimes things just get blown out of the water and you have got the best press release and it's amazing and you poured your heart and soul into it and it just doesn't work, doesn't fly, because something else happens in the news agenda, and that will happen. So again, you have to be quite hard-nosed in sort of this world. So don't worry if you get a few knocks early on. It's about sort of like persisting and adapting as you sort of go through. One really, really good thing to do is just consider it like the journalist. As the second bullet there says, they're gatekeepers. So you have to write for the journalist and make it interesting for them before it's interesting for the end audience, whether that's people that are going to potentially vote on something or have some kind of influence on a different area or sign up to, I don't know, a blood donation service or whatever the element may be. First of all, you have to get through that journalist. Now, as I said, journalists get so many different emails through. You have to, one, stand out a bit and be as snappy as possible in your sort of subject line, but also make sure that it's relevant to them. So when you're sending a release, something I like to do is, if possible, try and relate it to something they've written about before. So if it's something that's on their agenda already and that title and that journalist has written about that before, link that to it. So before you paste the press release into the body of the email, which I'll comment to in terms of practicalities, how to send things, but before you paste it onto the body of the email, have a little intro, hi Robin, great to, I hope you're doing okay, all that lovely, nice generic stuff. Saw you wrote about this last week, thought you might like an update from our point of view, and make it clear that this is why it is important to them. So don't be afraid of just doing that rather than sort of bulk sending out, which depending on the situation can work, but it's always better to try and personalize it as and when, if you can. It doesn't have to be loads, just a little bit. It's really important to remember that they are here to try and get more advertisers in. So I'm sure we've all seen it in our areas where we live. Local press has really been hit massively. There's a whole load of merger and acquisitions going on. There's lots of AI stuff. There's lots of clickbait things. So one recently that's been doing the rounds around my ways, Suffolk News. They've amalgamated lots of different titles and lots of them are shut down. So you've kind of got one massive one. One of the highest, biggest stories on that was revealed Suffolk's worst streets to live in, or something like that. So it's something that's a little bit scary. It's a little bit like people are going to click on it and, oh, is my street on there? What is the worst street? So it's a little bit sort of negative. But if that's the kind of sort of stuff they're working on, you kind of have to kind of play a bit of that game. So something that's quite a nice news story, maybe won't necessarily get in. So you might have to think about it, not in a negative slant, but putting it in context of what they think will make a good popular story for their readers. Last one here is a massive one, but I'm just touching on it because there's so much to it. Finding the journalist details, right? This always comes up in conversations. Some of you will have a list of people. I've got a manual one for a few local areas that I sometimes deal with clients. More often than not, titles are syndicated on a regional basis. So you have someone that, especially in London, that would work on a London Press kind of title, but also they'd be working with NewsQuest, the mother organisation, and they'd be working on something in Brighton as well. So it's very confusing to try and sort of like pitch and understand which is the right person. Most details usually are on the site, and you'll be able to find things. You can do a Google search and see who's written about certain topics. And sort of go in that way. You can pay for PR tools, but they can range into, I think one of the best ones, if anyone has any budget at all, I certainly don't, is Wroxhill is a very good one. Other ones are out and about, but they bring up a whole swathe of information. People have only ever written about this topic in the last 5 years or something. So really rich information. But yeah, trying to find the right people to target is very important. So that's something. Don't just send it to the info@ email address or mail to or whatever. Try and find the right person and target them potentially with that top line bit of, saw you wrote about this, or this is of interest because and then the press release underneath. So it's a little bit tailored. You can see there is one chat bit here. And that's Robin putting the slides in, which is very, very helpful, but I am on it, so I can see the little thing. Okay, so there will be a little break in a minute, so we'll have a little chance to go into a few separate rooms. A couple of things, think like a journalist. What's the story? Clear one-line headline. So emails, in email marketing world, with my other hat on, you've got around 60 characters, roughly, let's say, for different ways to break through to people. So if I was doing my email out for my company to people, I try and make it as short as possible. Sometimes if you have to have it longer, that's fine, but get the key information up front. So don't have the key information being your company involved, because with all due respect, that's not necessarily the most important thing, unless it's a big thing like, turns 100 or whatever. What's the issue that's going to catch the journalist's eye up front, and keep that right at the top? That subject line can be different to the actual title underneath. Doesn't really matter. It's just what's the thing that's going to make them open that email as opposed to many others. Why now? Tie it to current events. If there's something out that's happening, this doesn't necessarily mean you've got anything brand new to say. It could just be that it's in the news agenda. So heat wave, for example, could be one. Does that relate to your organisation? How do certain people or patients or individuals react differently to it. Days, trends, lots of sport and music going on in summer, Glastonbury and Wimbledon starting. Not saying in the same way you shouldn't for social media, you're just jumping on the trend just to jump on it. If there's something relevant to say, consider what's going on in the wider area and create an element of timeliness. That's what journalists are looking for because they move at such pace. That's the thing they're looking for. Sometimes you could send something a little bit earlier in advance of that. Say, with so-and-so date or something coming up later this year, I thought this would be interesting. Could we have a chat? Potentially there could be a conversation there with a spokesperson from your organisation. A real personal story, people over products. Sometimes if there are examples or case studies or that sounds very technical from my side, apologies, people from your organisations that have been helped, maybe that's the way into things. Rather than saying X organisation has helped 10 people, maybe it's like choose one of the people and what is their story? What's the emotive hook? What's the kind of the thing to them that could cut through? I'm just throwing loads of these out there, guys, right? These are all like some examples and some ways to do things. It's very difficult, especially with a massive group like this, which is great to have you all here, that this will resonate with every single sort of one of you. So it's just trying to like make you think of slightly different things to come through to. And something their audience will care about. Why is it important that the Cambridge newspaper will be interested in this? Get some stats from Cambridge about something that you do. So it's not necessarily anything brand new from you, but it's the geographic aspect, the localization aspect. So the classic one on the right is Man Bites Dog. Don't know if anyone's seen that before, but rather than Dog Bites Man, not a news story. Flip it, Man Bites Dog, incredible news story. Very sad news story, obviously. Another example is a bakery wins an award, which could be fantastic, or an organisation like one of you guys wins an award. That's potentially interesting, but they're getting loads of those. That's everybody wins awards. Construction companies, tree felling services, mechanics. Everybody wins an award. So what makes yours different? And if there isn't anything that's really stand out in that award, potentially sort of like flip it and create the story. So homelessness charity that's been just celebrated 25 years wins iconic award or something to that effect. So add some more detail to it rather than just being straightforward and award win. So put these in just for a bit of a break. One, to give me a little bit of a chance to not speak too long because it's boring when someone's just talking at you. I did one yesterday and this worked actually. Had an event in Newmarket and I cut my slides down in half and we had a basically 15-minute Q&A. So that's kind of what I'd like to do towards the end of this. If we can get time, because I think that's when people get more value out of it, when real problems and challenges come and then people sort of kick a few things around. So that's what I'd like to do. But for this bit, you can just go into your groups and either consider something that's in your world or something that's happened recently. If you don't want to sort of talk about your organisation, let's say Wimbledon or Glastonbury or anything that's going on at the moment that's sort of front of your mind, and just think about how that could have a few different sort of like hooks on it. So not loads of detail, but Glastonbury would be weather and I don't know, transport. I don't know what other things are. It's quite open. This is more of a chance of you guys to, someone I'm sure will want to share things and ask about it. So yeah, we'll go into a couple of rooms, 5 minutes, then we'll come back and see if a few people can just sort of share a couple of bits just to help the group sort of like think a little bit wider about this.
Okay. I'll pop you into those rooms now. We'll come back at 32. So we just keep an eye on the clock. You should get that warning that Zoom does anyway, but I'll let you go for it. Hello, I think there's somebody that's just rejoined. If you've just rejoined, we're doing breakout rooms, and the people in the room will keep you right. Just trying to make sure there's nobody in a room of just one or something.
No, I've never done. I did want to sort of interrupt, but I've never done the sort of background of this. I've done it on a few other platforms, but not on Zoom.
It was quite nice. It was quite nice to kind of say, like, I want 5 people in each room, assign randomly, don't include the co-hosts.
Oh, nice. Okay. Is this an enterprise version or like a paid for version of Zoom?
That we do have a paid for version of Zoom. The enterprise level, I think we can have up to like 300 people in here.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if this makes this feature any different. Everyone that is still in the main room with us, are you struggling to join the breakout room? Are you okay?
You can talk to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be back. I'll be back about four. Okay. Okay, that's fine.
Welcome back, everyone. I was just saying to Robin, I wasn't sure how much for. There's a thin line between like a wide open brief and then no brief. So I hope that a few people sort of found it interesting and were able to come with a few ideas that that you had. Is there anyone that is brave enough to come off mute or put your hand up and we can chat? I mean, as there's so many different areas that are covered probably on this call. If yeah, anyone has any ideas of a story, any story, even one that's out there at the moment that they thought was an interesting angle or a challenge they've got that is interesting, please do go ahead and share.
We had a couple on group 3, if you want me to tell you those.
Yeah, please go for it, Mandy.
One of them was specifically around Glastonbury, and the story that we would have been asking them to report on was in relation to volunteers at Glastonbury who do the tidy up, then selling tents. So selling tents, Gucci sunglasses, etc. With the cost of living crisis, they could actually have donated those to a homeless charity. So actually bringing that, so it appeals to people and say there's people who don't even have money to put a roof over their head, and to be able to give them the tents rather than selling the tents to profit for yourself and Gucci sunglasses, etc. And that's a true story because somebody I know knows the person that did that, and they believe that they actually sold. It wasn't from Glastonbury, it was from Creamfields, but similar sort of vibe. Believe that they probably sold the sunglasses back to the person who lost them. And then we had another one which was around the pride flag and why as Fire and Rescue Services, we fly the pride flag, and we had somebody in our group who's from a wildlife charity as well, who said that they'd done some work around Nature is Queer, I think she said it was called. Tell me if I've incorrectly quoted you, but it was maybe looking at that angle, as in actually looking at nature and looking at animals, because people love, don't they? People love dogs and cats and animals and stuff. You know, that softer side appeals to people. So maybe you could spin that side as well, alongside why we, and some case studies why we fly the pride flag.
Yeah, nice. And I guess that's also a probable challenge from knowing a few people in different fire services that, yeah, or with any organisation actually, the woke agenda or anything like that. You know, you're trying to, you want to be representative of everyone you can, but then you want to like try and not convince other people. Do you know what I mean? Just tell the story in an accurate way and get the right sort of information out there. Yeah. But yeah, the volunteers one's really good because, again, I'll come on to reactive and proactive in a little bit, but it's essentially you're jumping on something that is happening already, and it's sort of like front of mind and is everywhere. So you don't have to talk about, you know, necessarily the music or the event itself, or if you're not down in sort of that way neck of the woods, there still could be a possibility. I think that's then when it moves from like could to should, if you know what I mean. So like have the idea, kick it around, and then potentially sort of move it forward. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for sharing.
Welcome.
Anyone else want to go? I think we've got time for a couple of quick ones if anyone wants to. Oh yeah, Helen, go for it.
Yeah, we did something slightly different. We started talking about a couple of stories, and I talked about a framework that we use that we've got in our media plan, which is around the truth test. So I don't know, Adam, if I've only heard about this in one media training I've done, but it's like where it's topical, relevant, unusual, element of people and human. And then we started like having a look at some stories and like a couple of things that we mentioned about whether that applied. So I just, yeah.
Yeah, it's really good to have that. And I mean, there's so many frameworks out, right? But I think it's good to have that kind of thing of taking yourself, all of them, take yourself away from the story, the biases of the organisation or anything like that, and you genuinely think, would that be something of interest to read or to look at? And is the information there? Yeah.
But I find like, you know, that quite helpful if you kind of look at something and think it's not landing, or you just don't see the story in it, just to kind of break it down a bit and see whether it fits these boxes. So
absolutely, because we're so, you know, focused on things. We think it's an amazing idea because it is an amazing idea to us and our audience, but sort of sometimes having an external perspective or someone that doesn't understand about that thing, maybe in a different department in the world you're in, just sense check it, right? Because they'll ask different questions than we possibly would. Some really good ones in the chat around the Wimbledon queue as well. Yeah, I saw it was like 5 hours on Monday or Tuesday they were queuing up for. Crazy. And then yeah, so the data point here from Nikki, thank you. So I'll read this out. So a story about the reach of the charities those volunteers work for. So from Glastonbury, we have raised enough money to work with Montenegro, providing a fire appliance to an area that had hit with wildfire. They only had a donkey and cart to respond to it. So it's the maybe the charities that the volunteers work for could be the way in. And then how to get ahead of the journalists was a feature for Group 2. How do we get our view out rather than them putting their own slant on it? Suggesting this speed, getting the message out in the timeliest opportunity. Absolutely. I think there's a really good point of trying to be as reactive as possible and sort of get ahead of something. That said, like, you've got to make sure that it's not watertight, but kind of like, you know, the journalist is going to ask questions that they want to know. For example, if you, and I've had this happen before in corporates or bigger businesses, that you've got something out, but the actual information isn't there. So the data, okay, well, somebody wants to see what happened 2 years ago and 1 year ago to check that the percentages are quite right or whatever. if you don't have that kind of stuff, the whole thing falls down and the journalist has lost complete sort of trust. So just making sure that you have got the speedy response, but it's due diligence sort of kind of thing. And I'll just do one more. So from Rona, thank you. Group 7 spoke about a variety of topics from my POV. Climate action. So our social enterprise receives donations of brand new clothing and sells at £2 to £3 saving from landfill and generated much needed income for our charity. That's great. That's really great. But I think there needs to be, from my point of view, another why, because there's so many stories, fantastic stories from all of you guys, I'm sure, about brilliant work you're doing. But so the link there would have been potentially the Glastonbury sort of element, but because it's not necessarily tied to the Glastonbury element, maybe it wouldn't have been picked up, if you see what I mean. So maybe you could have a think about like the donations, maybe in the week after Glastonbury, or maybe potentially the week before. I know this is looking through to next year, but considering this is just one option, like thinking about how many donations you get versus Glastonbury, or how many years of stuff it'd have to be to be donated, have all the donations that you potentially need. Not sort of tripping over words there a little bit, but it just needs a little bit more for me. Not saying this is a critique or anything. It's great work, but yeah, thank you all so much for that. There will be another one, one of these in a few more minutes. Just sort of mix it up a little bit, makes it a little bit sort of more interesting. So I'll just carry on for now. Any more questions, please go for it. Drop stuff in the chat, and we'll see where we get to. So a few little bits of advice from me. Everyone does this differently, right? So there is no, nailed on right way to do things. It depends on the journalist, the title, how you work, various different things, right? But for me, this is how I have found that works quite well. Again, depending on the story and the situation, maybe it's a phone call rather than an email, depending on the journalist. Completely depends whether it's a one-off and a unique piece for, goodness, like Newsnight or something like that, right? You would want to try and speak to the producer rather than just email across. But in general, how to pitch, write like you'd speak to a friend in the pub. So not any kind of like sales deck or sort of like, more like corporate information. Conversational is key for me, because that's how they're going to try and want to translate it and potentially lift some of it straight into the newspaper, magazine or title. We've spoken before about the email short. The subject line really matters. So consider like what words are in the front there. Personalize. Know that journalist speak. Know what they've written about before. So I know that there is a journalist that is an editor of something called I think Business Pink is a pink coloured business press for the East Anglian Daily Times, where I am. And I know that they've had a couple of events recently. This is just from following, which sounds very creepy, but following them on social media. But I know what Liz, this lady, has been up to recently, and I know the titles and sort of the subjects she's been speaking about. So then I'd know, and I could drop that in a conversation that, it can't be sort of awkward and forced, but if it's relevant to the piece, it's all sort of playful. Possibly linked to other pieces they've written, maybe if they've not written it, but other pieces that the newspaper, so the title, has written rather than the specific journalist. So in the body of the email, I paste the entire press release. I don't put an attachment on. I don't attach images. I've been stung too many times in the past because that's where some email servers for journalists sort of block certain things if I've not been emailed before, or if the image is too large, or various different things. So what I always do is make sure there's a Dropbox or a Google Drive or something with all the right information and links in. I will put the bit of intro to the person, very short, paste everything, title, the whole lot, whole press release and notes below. Sometimes I'll put an image embedded in, make sure it's low enough resolution to sort of not block the email. Maybe under 1 megabyte should be sufficient, but you can add that in because that sometimes catches the eye. Maybe if it's a graph, if it's a story that's data led, could help. And then you'll say in sort of the top intro bit, I've got some more information here, and then you can click on that Dropbox, Google link, whatever, WeTransfer, and you can also add a bit.ly link, which is like a shorter link, so you can see how many people have clicked that link and how many people have opened it. Some of the tools do that already. I've found that the easiest because then they can choose what they want to. So they've got everything there. They don't have to come back to anyone. They are busy. They want the information then and there. So again, really interesting to hear your views of this right at the end of the Q&A, because everyone's always learning. I'd just be interested to know how you do it. But that's sort of how I do it. Body of an email, nothing attached, so you can potentially could knock out of a server or email server or something. And be helpful, not pushy. So yes, of course, you can check up and check in and say, look, did you receive this? Was this of interest? But I'd say like a couple of checks, maybe 3. Don't sort of bombard. It's already gone by that point. Don't say, I'd like some PR, had that happen with a client. Don't bombard and shotgun generic email addresses and send it out to everyone, because everyone talks to everyone in that organization. So say you send it to 5 journalists, they're all sitting across from each other or on teams together. It's going to be like, who's dealing with this? It becomes too confusing. Focus it down and make sure you're speaking to the right person. That could be the editor email address. If it's a generic sort of press release, that's absolutely fine. But don't just spam everyone, and don't follow up 5 times in a week. Also with phone calls, sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. You have to judge it on the person. Some people prefer that, some people don't. More often than not, journalists, in my experience, trade and consumer, regional press that is, don't have time to answer phone. They've got these emails to go through. They need to try and find the right story. Yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, delete. So they're pretty pressed for time. So just bear that in mind. Press releases, messaging, what sort of, I think most of you are potentially here for. As I say, pop your questions in, interrupt me if you need to. It's far better if we have a back and forth. So I'll just keep going unless you hear otherwise. So in terms of sort of crafting key messages for your press release, you've got your sort of organizational kind of like brand messaging, tone of voice things, hopefully. This is more about what the individual story is about. So it shouldn't be something, the key messages shouldn't be something new. It should be aligned with what your business and organization already do, right? It shouldn't be something sort of outside of that kind of world. It should be embedded in your values and strategy. Less is more. So again, with the elevator pitch in the top right there, you're trying to get this information across to people in as short a time as possible. The elevator pitch, for those that don't know, is sort of like you're in an elevator with someone for a couple of floors or something, and you need to get something across. So it's a few sentences just to explain what your organization or what your press release is about. What's the story? The granny test is the bottom one. Again, similar kind of test, but this is more about simplicity. Rather than sort of speed. So make sure that if it was your gran or somebody's gran that you're speaking to, how can you make it as straightforward as possible for them to understand? Again, caveat on that, if it's for a trade title that knows all about fundraising, or specific type of healthcare work or homelessness or something that you're dealing with, that does change it. But essentially, you're trying to make it as straightforward as possible for people to understand. Couple of bits here I'm going to sort of like go through quite quickly because I want people to have the time, or what time to have a decent sort of Q&A. So this is storytelling. Think, Feel, Do is a nice framework, pretty straightforward. What you wanting the audience to the end audience to think, to feel. Are they going to change about a certain subject? Are they going to be more aware or inspired or more more interested in a certain cause? And what do you want them to do? Do you want them to sign up to something? Do you want them to email their MP? Do you want them to go to this website and sort of watch these videos? Whatever the sort of aspect is. The other methods of persuasion, which might come into press releases, which is the next slide. Ethos, pathos, logos. So ethos is about character. So who is the authoritative figure, or what's the credible nature of this? Is this going to be there is somebody that has great experience in your world? Again, let's go with homelessness. A figure with great experience in your world that is talking and sharing some information, and that is the thing that's the key thing in the press release? Is it the emotion of it? So the storytelling aspect, the bringing the emotion and the compassion and empathy potentially to aspects, or emotion on the other way, the sort of anger and the fire in the belly, the kind of, you know, the strength of feeling. And then the logic side is, you know, data, facts, information. I think we've had a few sort of comments in the chat about this. Make sure it's sort of like it's watertight, but make sure it's also comparative against the right element. I think I've got a slide on this in a minute. You can also use open source data. So if you're based in a certain region or even nationally, you can use ONS data. You can use Google searches. You can use all these things that are like free and available. Yes, it takes some time to sort of unpick and put them together, but you've got comparative data sources or things to potentially help you focus that story and find that one sort of key nugget out of all that sort of wealth of data that can potentially help. So yeah, proactive elements. I think I've got, yeah, sorry, these two are the wrong way round, but I've got two ways. Not going to read the whole thing, but essentially you've got another way to split things could be proactive and reactive. So you either create a story or you follow a story. So you know that if something is happening throughout the news, that you maybe you can create a story from within, or you follow something that's on the news agenda currently, nationally, regionally, or elsewhere, and that can be something you have an opinion to. So when something happens, you can say, look, we've got experience in this area to the journalist, we can speak on this topic. So it might not even be a press release you're putting forward. It's, look, we've got this person, they've got boom, boom, boom experience. We're happy to talk about this, please just consider. That's something that has worked really well for me coming in sort of fresh to a couple of clients in the past, where I put together just a very simple, straightforward PDF that's just literally like a one-pager of a CEO or a CTO or a director that has certain influence in the area, and send that out proactively to news outlets, broadcast, TV, radio as well. And that's more of a inquisitive, like, look, we've got this person, they can speak on these 3 topics, make it really clear, boom, boom, boom. Then that person potentially could be on the list. You just don't know, it could be sort of put into a little book or file. So when something does come up, they need someone to react quite quickly. So there's a way to potentially get in front of people without sort of the press release aspect. So yeah, just going through, create a story for proactive. Your storytelling, you're looking for something about, this is a bit corporate, but the launch, the merger, winning an award, anniversary, special day, hit a certain number of X, Y, Z. Potentially use human interest, so quotes from people, could be a quote-led thing, could be really strong. And yeah, keep your eyes and ears especially open to stories coming from below as well as from above. I'm sure you all are. I'm sure we're all on the same boat with that. But you know, certain things can happen sort of on the ground that could turn into a story. So that could be that proactive. Let's run with this. And then reactive side is sometimes called newsjacking. It's when you notice a story or trend and respond to it. So you could either respond sort of on a wider basis, you could respond directly to that title, you could respond in a sort of sector way. So it's a national story, but you want to focus down on care titles or homeless titles, whatever the things may be. Respond with a quote that's not vanilla. We're happy to back this. We think this is a great idea. It has to have something a little bit more to it, and it can't be a direct, well, here at XYZ, this is what we do. It should be something about the wider topic, but then the secondary message, in my experience, is the one that comes with the organisation name or anything like that. Potentially put down the way of kickback and bad press. If you do something like that, you are sort of putting yourself out there a little bit. But if you have a belief in what you're sort of like saying, then I think that's something you should, again, test and learn, try, see what reaction is, because from that you may get even more follow-ups from that journalist or that title, because they know that your organisation responds quickly, has a strong quote, and can get sign-off quickly, for example. So that can really help. Hope this is all useful for you guys. Just pop something in the chat if you need to, or just jump in. This is something that maybe some of you are very interested in. It's kind of like the upside down triangle pyramid. It's about how you kind of form a press release in general. So on the right hand side, you've got the lead, the most important info, the 5 W's and how. So who, what, when, where, why, how. That's the first couple of paragraphs. That's the thing that how you should, caveat with that, write a more traditional news story, because journalists are pressed for time. They're going to take this and put it into a title, magazine, newspaper, whatever. They need that information in that kind of order. So they want to do as minimal kind of edits as possible, because they've got to go on to the next. They've got to do 20 stories a day or whatever the thing may be, right? So you're trying to make it as easy as possible for them. Thanks, Jane. Sorry, Jane was just in the chat. I think I've got to explain that. The body is the crucial info. So this is and again, it's got to be unbiased. It's just got to be factual. It's got to be sort of neutral almost. But you know, what's the controversy? What's the situation? What's the challenge? What's the opportunity? Maybe the quote comes up sort of there. Bit of the logic, and then the tail is the extra information. That's the further related items. That's the, you know, oh, by the way, this organization has done XYZ and this is the 5th year of operation and whatever. Doesn't have to be War and Peace. That can be sufficient, depending on the title, on the topic. And a couple of tips for me down on the left side. Again, just running over and repeating what we were saying before, reinforcing it. Make sure your story's newsworthy. So take yourself out of it. Ask someone that is on a separate team, maybe a colleague or a trusted peer or a mentor, and you can ask them. Just make sure that it not only like reads well grammatically and things like that, but that the story is strong as it can be. Because once you've sort of got that out there, there's no sort of chance to go back and then go, oh no, actually we've got this better bit of information. It's kind of, it's gone and the journalist won't be interested. Target the right title sector, make sure you've got them segmented, and you can change the press release into 3 or 4 different versions, slightly different titles, slightly different terminology. Doesn't have to take ages to do. It's just make sure you repurpose it properly. The 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why. Inverted pyramid structure. Create a newsworthy headline hook. So considering the title could go a little bit more, I don't know, sun or a little more sensational. Definitely if it's regional press at the moment, some of the regional titles around my way are pretty sensationalist. But create that hook for the journalist. They'll rewrite, they want to rewrite, but give them something that's kind of, you know, in the ballpark for their title. Write in the third person, obviously apart from the quote. And this is a really, 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 really key one. Cannot emphasize this enough. Put one story into context. The amount of times that with either in a blog situation or a video or something on the website or anything, there's too many competing kind of things. So it's like, yes, we're talking about this, but we also want to mention our financials have been great. And it's like, okay, you can, but it has to be in the right way. It can't be kind of too similarly strengths piece. Again, caveat, unless that works for that story. You know, if part of the story is about funding or whatever, maybe that can potentially be part of it. But just try and keep it to one story in context. Another 5 minutes, if that's okay. Just to go into groups, into breakout rooms. This is just a little bit on what we've done before. So sort of like the proactive and reactive, the maybe data point story. What rather than writing it, but like what is the story that comes to your mind when you're hearing this, but what is the thing that you think that people will really get some understanding from, or a story that has a bit of newsworthiness in your organisation at the moment? Okay, thanks very much everyone that's had to drop off. No problem at all. Thank you for coming. We'll send the slides around anyway. Yeah, Robin, if you're okay to please put people in for another 5 minutes.
Of course, I will try to shuffle everyone.
Thank you.
Recreate, there we go. And I'll open those. If anyone has any issues, just let me know, but those should be open now.
for future ones. Is 5 minutes? Is it enough? It's only like an hour and a half kind of like session, so I don't want to sort of go to 10 minutes. It feels like I don't want you sort of sat there for too long, but also 5 minutes I appreciate is, yeah, thanks Georgie, too short. But yeah, is that the general consensus? Maybe I should just, next time if we do this, do just maybe a bit more talking, do one that's kind of together, so there's like a 10-minute block. Would that work? Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you. Oh yeah, the introductions as well. That's a very good point, Lisa. I just assume everyone knows everyone. That's the problem. So. Why are we congratulating for now? Or should we make that more public?
I think they've written their first press release this week.
Oh, nice one. Okay, we'll get you on screen. We'll critique it. No, I'm joking.
Sorry, Sonal. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
That's
Definitely
good.
not sharing it on screen, but yeah.
Congratulations.
I think I was every comms person's nightmare.
It's pretty, yeah, the amount of edits, and when you get down to, I don't know if it's got to this, but you know, version 11 AB _ final _ this
Not
one.
not far from that.
Yeah,
not far
yeah.
from that.
Yeah. I feel you. Well done. It's good to get it out.
Thank
Have
you.
you received much back yet, or?
Well, it went out on Monday, and we've only put it out to local. So we're waiting to see whether anything hits. So
Yes.
yeah.
So I guess
see.
things are similar down here, right? I guess it's like a Thursday publication or whatever. Or,
Yeah.
There's an interesting one just before we come on to the 5 minutes. You know, a few people sharing. Really quick one. There's a lot down here in Norwich. There's Norwich Seeker, Ipswich.co.uk. They are kind of anti-regional press kind of issues. So, you know, like all the problems we've discussed and how it's too busy and it's adverts heavy. And so these are kind of like citizen journalism-esque kind of things. Obviously, they're going to turn into some level of advertising commercial, but they're kind of like starting that whole thing afresh. Have you got anything like that around you?
So I'm down in Luton, and we have something called Luton Today. We used to have, I think I found something like an online thing, which is like Lutonian or something like that, but I haven't figured out how you get through. So my situation is I'm employed by the council. So it was the council comms team that, you know, wanted to kind of turn it into comms speak, like council kind of press release style. But my team are actually kind of on a fixed term contract, and we're working more alongside the arts and culture strategy group within Luton. So we're almost representing them as well when we put a press release out. So we wanted to try to avoid Luton council speak or that sort of tone. So that was where I got a lot of my pushback on, and I was like, no, we're keeping it as it is, and I'm keeping as much. It was longer than I would have liked it to be, but I felt it was important because it was information about what funding we've got, what are the different streams. It had to be one because we won't have anything to talk about until probably about November when we announce who's actually secured funding, and then it will get more interesting because we'll be able to sort of say, this person's going to be working on this, and this is when the events are starting, and this is where they're going to be an opportunity for you to go and see what they're doing with the audience. And so that's we have
awesome.
to get as much in as possible.
That's brilliant. Well done for getting it out. More to come. Not more this week. Just
not more this week. More later this year.
Okay,
One
thank
thing
you.
is, I can't remember how I found this training horse. I found it when I first started with this contract about a month or two ago. But is there any way where I can find out? Like, can you email me where I found out more? That'd be great.
Yeah.
I think I signed up with our Luton Arts email address, so that helps you find me. Thanks.
Yeah, Robin's your gal. She'll sort it out. Okay, awesome. Congratulations. So look, really quick one. So, 'cause I want to do some Q&A afterwards. So what did anyone sort of find interesting? Was there any angles you could think of? Was it a data thing? Does anyone want to sort of jump in and just share like 2 or 3 of those? Who's going to be brave? Okay, well, I'll start. There was one I did relatively recently and it's more about like repurposing press release. So they had, for a maltsters, so the base for lots of beers, whiskies and biscuits, essentially cakes, ingredients company. And they wanted a press release out, and they were thinking about it in a real sort of like one-dimensional structure. So it was like, we're sending this, it's about craft beer, and it's for maltsters for craft beer, and we're sending it to craft beer. And I was like, okay, cool. But could you also adapt it and send it to a few different areas? So even though it's not necessarily about, move the craft beer bit down, still in there, it's still making it clear, but talk about sustainability press, huge at the moment, just like different titles. Talk about farmers, so the farming and agri press is massive. So change the beer around, even if they're not doing malt at the moment, make them aware that this company is making moves in their world and helping them become more efficient and things like that. So it's not always necessarily about like a brand new sort of thing. It's just sort of what can you repurpose and use in slightly different sort of areas. Don't know if that helps. Anyone wants to sort of jump in on this? If not, I can just carry on. Too short a time, just a bit of a chat. That's cool. All good. I've got a little bit on broadcast here, but I'm just going to sort of whiz through because I'd rather have some little bit of time on a Q&A because I think that's far more rich and interesting and Sonal's kind of experience and various other people just sort of like jumping in and having a say. Broadcast can be scary, right? And I'm not saying that you need to go for broadcast first off, but what you've got, again, is about repurposing. So you've got that story, you've done the hard work, you've got the messaging signed off after V11_final_1/1836 midnight, whatever. Broadcast is TV and radio. There are community versions of radio, more than broadcast, that could help. It's very trustworthy. Coverage massively increases awareness, although from an objective point of view, that's not necessarily a KPI or an outcome, but you can help sort of like factor it into things. And it could be that someone wants to donate more because they've seen something on TV or something like that. There's lots of different ways. Social versus broadcast, you can also cut the clips up potentially. Timeliness is vital and the quality of things, but could you film and distribute it? So if you ever get anyone in to come and film something, one thing I'd 100% recommend is whatever you do, if you do no other press releases ever, film some B-roll and own that B-roll. So what I mean by that is, say if you've got a theatre, so get someone to come in and do an interview about something, great, but also film B-roll of the theatre, like the panning up, people walking through, people shaking hands in the office, people filling up, whatever, because that stuff is gold. Because if you send that in a list, in a Dropbox or something to a usually a freelance cameraman will come and do a lot of these things, or camera person. So you can give them that, and the package is already set up. So it helps them out, and you'll be sort of like, in a little bit quicker. Potential for radio over TV. Yes, maybe as an ads package you have to do, but also like you do podcast, lots of different things. This is related to what we're talking about press releases, because it's just using that information. You're just talking to a producer rather than a journalist. So I think that's the best kind of way to look at it. The producer is your gatekeeper rather than the journalist. Lots of options. There's a few down here: Suffolk Sound, Gen X, Suffolk. There's lots of local ones. Okay, they might not be your absolute nailed on best audience, but some of them could be, and some of them could get you some more coverage. And even if it's that radio station promoting it on their socials that they've done an interview with you, maybe that's the way that people see it rather than the actual interview itself, if you see what I mean. Long chats, larger commercial opportunities. You know what you get with radio. I'm just going to move on to this one down here. So the TV part still can reach millions of people. If you get onto like, Look East in my region, syndicated ITV, Channel 4 News, whatever. Good visuals can be the difference between getting a story on air or not. So if you want to share something about a theatre, I'll go back to, but have that footage as the to show the person, because they're not going to go out for nothing. They need to see what that thing is like before they send a camera crew out to do their own stuff. Some stock footage can help, offer filming opportunities for journalists. If you are a homeless charity, say, look, our CEO is going to go out and do some checks on the homeless. Forgive my language, maybe it's not quite right, but, you know, like going out into the actual, you know, on boots on the ground kind of scenario and seeing people, would you like to come? That could be another sort of way to do it. That's the story, that's the emotional thing. TV slots are hard to come by. Airtime can be short, but it could be possible. It's mega nerve-wracking, and you need extra training, especially for the person that is like media training for the person that's going to be speaking, because that's invaluable. But in terms of getting through to them, this is finding out who the producers are on the certain TV shows and then going through them. Now, they work potentially 8 to 10 weeks in advance. So if you've got something coming up in December, get in touch now to get yourself booked in, because they book the slots because they know what is going on, and they'll film it maybe earlier and build up to it. So the television side is hugely challenging, but can be really, really useful. I think, yeah, don't forget regional radio, a lot of cutbacks, but you can potentially get some wins through there. Thank you very much. As I said, we've only got a little bit of time. I'm more than happy to take questions afterwards. Get in touch with me. My details will be shared. More than happy to have a chat. It's all about, for me, helping other people and a bit of karma, but it goes a long way. I like that sort of stuff. Fills my cup in a way. But a bit of Q&A right now. Has anyone got any questions that I haven't covered? Want to delve on a little bit more? And yeah,